We initiated this journey called the Good Vibes Road Trip, and the goal was to do a couple months traveling out of a van. One of the first things we did on that trip was intentionally go broke.
This idea of leaning into the unknown and seeing what life has for us is such a beautiful gift.
Your kid will teach you how to be the best parent ever.
Your kids will not likely listen to you, but they will invariably become you. How often parents want to give their kids what they never got, meanwhile never giving it to themselves first.
And if you're not in tune with your own anger, then you're not going to be aware of what you're passing on to. Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Embracing Human podcast.
Before we begin the next episode, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for your support in helping us grow our podcast.
Take a moment to like, subscribe, or follow on whatever platform you're watching this on.
Your engagement helps us to grow our platform as well as allows us to invite even more interesting interviews in the future. I hope you enjoy the following episode and wish that you gain insight, clarity, or knowledge about what it means for you to embrace being human. Welcome to another episode of the Embracing Human podcast. Today I am your host, Scott Stone, and I will be interviewing my co-host, Leo Castrance, my roommate and what is becoming a great friend of mine. And today we're going to explore Leo's story, how he found himself here in Maui and the journey that he went on to get here. It's quite an entertaining adventure, and I invite you to stick around for all the different segments of the journey this man has went on as a father, a men's worker, a traverser of the matrix, and many other things to come. So without further ado, Leo, is there anything you would like to say as an introduction to yourself, or would you like to jump right in?
First, thank you for that lovely introduction. I think you covered most of how I would describe myself or define myself, especially in context of the past and how I got here. So I'm feeling called to leave it at that for the most part and just let the stories and this share kind of paint the picture of who I am and how I desire to dance in this world.
So to take it far back, let's go back to your childhood. Leo grew up on the Hawaiian island of Oahu, and there's an interesting differentiation for those who come to Hawaii versus those who were born and raised here, or born or raised here, and that term is a local, and so Leo is a local boy. And so, Leo, could you tell our listeners about what it's like growing up in Hawaii as a local and how that differentiates from being a tourist?
Yeah, that's a big question too. And I think it's just a big question for me because for those who have grown up here or who have moved here, there is a very clear line between local and tourist. And as a local, I had my own experiences of becoming local, I guess you could say. Well, first and foremost, I was not born here in Hawaii. Of all places, I was born in Spain. And what led me to Hawaii, which is also a very clear line of division on the islands, which was military. I see it as a very powerful blessing for me, for my dad to have the opportunity to be stationed here in Hawaii, specifically Pearl Harbor. And I moved to Oahu when I was 5. And thankfully, somehow, normally in the military, you get stationed somewhere else every 3 years. And I did not have that. I actually, thankfully, stayed in Hawaii throughout my whole childhood, which was a very unique experience for me because I didn't view myself as local. A big part of that is because of my neighborhood and the narratives that were presented in the culture of Hawaii. Military is kind of a sore thumb of a presence on the islands for many reasons. And so I grew up in a military neighborhood, and every 3 years, everyone around me would change up and switch. And I was the only one who stayed put. And I lived in military housing up until I was, I believe, 15. And going to elementary and intermediate school mixed with majority military kids, with the backdrop of Hawaii and the culture of Hawaii, I really believe made me who I am today, in the sense of my ability to connect with all kinds of people. I was kind of forced to be that way in order to survive in the jungles of childhood. And so I would flip flop a lot between the local scene and the military kid scene, I guess you could say. It was definitely a bubble for the military kids. Everything you needed as a kid and as a family in the military was provided for within a couple minutes drive. And they intentionally made it that way. And so it was very, for a lot of the childhood experience, secluded from what Hawaii was actually like. And when I hit 16, my dad had the opportunity to retire, which was also the same time I was about to go into high school. And their goal and plan was, after retirement, to move to the Philippines. And I was completely against that. And I wasn't vocal about it at first. I always knew as a kid that would be something that would happen. And as I got older, it never really felt an alignment, but I didn't know how to really speak of it because I could tell my parents desired to go back to the motherland. Both my parents are from the Philippines originally. And I felt like it was what was meant to be. And how that shifted was I had a family party, and I call them my cousins, Calabash family in Hawaii, where coworkers became family members and the kids became your cousins. And you just have these big drinking parties and barbecues. And we were playing outside, and my cousins were like, "So, are you excited to move to the Philippines?" And I was like, "Hell no. I actually don't want to, and I want to go to high school here." Fast forward a couple days later, my dad comes home from work and he's like, "Hey, we need to have a talk." And apparently, my cousins told my uncle that I did not want to move to the Philippines. And he told my dad, and he told my mom, and we had this conversation. It was probably the first real big talk I had with my parents around how I felt. And I told them that I really wanted to attend high school here because of my friends, and it was familiar and safe. And I was just starting to come into my own being and seeing this opportunity, because as well as me going to high school, it also meant we were moving out of the military housing into a local neighborhood. And that was a transition in itself, because I talked differently and I carried myself differently in a noticeable sense from other kids. In that process was really able to uniquely create my own world. I found a way to kind of be this bridge, because a lot of my friends were in the military growing up, and a lot of my new friends were local. And usually you don't necessarily intertwine them on the weekends, and I kind of did. And I think the potency of this story for me, this experience, is the exposure I received as a child when it came to different cultures, because the military is full of all kinds of cultures. I mean, we would have, funny enough, like there would always be the token Mexican family, the token Filipino family, the token white family, the token black family around my whole neighborhood. And I enjoyed it thoroughly because it was always different and fresh. And whenever I got to be exposed to go into their houses, I got to see different worlds. And it built a lot of this curiosity. And it also inspired me to want to travel, because all of these people were from all over. And a lot of the people who join the military see that opportunity to travel through the military paid for, and getting to see places you would never expect. And I really feel that's where I got my travel bug, and also gave me kind of the operation system to be in new cultures, new countries, and new environments and feel welcomed at home, and vice versa, which allowed me to really build powerful, beautiful connections around the world. And I truly believe that's because I grew up in Hawaii the way I did. And I know a lot of people have had similar experiences, whether they're in the military or not, just because the history of Hawaii is a melting pot of cultures. All Asian races, a lot of South American races come through, and they came out here to farm. And that's what the culture of Hawaii is this melting pot of different ethnicities coming together to cohabitate and co-create and work together. And that's how the 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 community dynamic of aloha for me was introduced. And because of this upbringing, it's also why the reason I chose have always dreamt of raising my family here in Hawaii was so that my son would be exposed to similar experiences so that when he gets older, it becomes a superpower of his. It's been a journey returning back to Hawaii, that's for sure. I'll go into that a little later, but I've always resonated with this journey for me as The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, where I left Hawaii at a certain age, kind of burnt out on island fever, and through my journey somehow found the treasure was waiting for me back at home. So here I am today exploring that treasure as a father on Maui in paradise.
You share in that story about, walking between the worlds and being a bridge between the civilian population and the military population, and something you've shared with me that I'd like you to share upon, because I think it's something that a lot of our listeners will be able to resonate with in one way or another, is this idea that your mom instilled within you of not sticking out.
Mm.
And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that looked like and also felt like.
Yeah, that's a really important question, especially revolving around parenting and the way we do it. As fun as growing up in the environment I did, it was in many ways as a child really difficult. Again, both my parents are from the Philippines, and with that comes a culture within itself and an experience within itself that they're bringing along. Clearly, most people who join the military out of a place like the Philippines come from a very poor background and see the opportunity to pursue the American dream, which my dad was blessed to have that opportunity. He started out in the Philippine Marines, and so as those of you that are familiar with the military constructs in general, the Marines are the ones you don't fuck with, in the sense that they're front lines guys and in many ways embody the true essence of a soldier. So that was my dad when he was in his 20s, doing that in the Philippines, in the jungles, and had the blessing of an opportunity to be recruited to the military. I can't and I can only imagine what that transition was like, to leave the Philippines at the time they did, a third world country that was very much struggling, to come to the mother or the great dream of the Americas. And with that, he brought my mom along, who was pregnant at the time. And again, I can and I can't imagine what that would have brought up, stepping into a whole new experience. And what I do know is it brought a lot of fear, which is expected because you're going to a complete unknown environment, infrastructure, country, culture, pretty much blindfold. And my mom just trusted that this was the best. And of course, of her background and upbringing, she knew it was going to be better than what she experienced. And so when we landed in Hawaii, a lot of the philosophies of the way I was raised, which is very much tied into the Asian shame culture, and even heightened in the environments of being around different cultures, is this fear of judgment and rejection or exclusion. And because my mom always wanted the best opportunities for me, in her mind, the best way to acquire those opportunities was to blend in, to not be different. In her mind, we were very different. English was a second language for them. Just the way they cooked, cleaned, did everything. Because at the same time, my mom also, and I don't know if this was conscious or not, still found ways to bring in our Filipino culture into our household, but was very secretive of it outside. And so when you ask that question, what it was like to be raised like that, the ways that it manifested into my reality of experiences, the way I dressed, the way I talked. And like I said, there was a clear line between local and military. And from what I can recall and remember is the local community was viewed less than the military in within the bubble of the military. So therefore, I, because of the friends I would hang out with, I'd come home sometimes speaking pidgin, and my mom would be like, not happening. And of course I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't even notice it. And it's because her fear of me walking around this military neighborhood with other military kids and I start talking pidgin, then I'm going to be labeled as a local kid. And to her, that struck fear because then now the families are going to judge me and potentially the kids wouldn't hang out with me or there would be complaints, like whatever it may be. If it came back to negative attention towards us, my mom had to fix it. So I always had to be aware of the way I was carrying myself almost at any moment. And with the Filipino culture as well, not a lot of people talk about this, but the shade of the color of your skin is a big impact. There's something within the Philippines where if you're lighter skin, it's not something, it's pretty obvious. But the lighter your skin, the more you're liked. The more opportunity you have, the more ability you have to being someone important or famous. And so every time I was playing outside, I was just a kid playing outside in the hot, hot sun and just kept getting darker and darker. And my mom would always call out how dark I was getting. And I never understood it. I never really questioned it. I was just like, I'm just doing me, Mom. Like, what are you talking about? And now I look back, I can see how much she was really trying out of love and fear to create the best life for me. It taught me a lot of what not to do as well as a parent. And what it did for me was like I never could really be my authentic self at any given moment. And as well as my mom's profession at the time was a home caretaker, is what they called it, for kids whose parents were in the military who weren't of age for school. So Monday through Friday, all day till 5 o'clock pretty much, there'd be like 6 toddlers in my house. So my mom never really, most of my upbringing when I was living there, could give me the quality attention and presence that I wanted. And what I did receive instead of that was critique, fear, judgment, and a lot of projection, which only pushed me as a young age to be hyper independent and to take care of myself and to be really rebellious and sneaky, which all of it totally exists in my life, present day. But it was difficult, and difficult because it's everything as an adult I've been rewiring in my brain. And that wasn't necessarily introduced to me until I started traveling and realizing like how special my upbringing was, which allowed me to connect and create amazing connections and show the dark side of that as well, where essentially I became a chameleon and I could blend in with anybody and everybody and anywhere. But what was missing was who was Leo outside of all of that without the chameleon superpower. And till this day, I'm still learning who that person is. And as a parent, it's coming up as well with the way I communicate and teach and guide and lead, of giving my son the opportunity to be fully himself and supporting his exploration of that no matter what others think no matter even what I think sometimes, and curious how that's going to manifest into his future with also having the experience of growing up here. But I think it's one of the biggest lessons that I'm navigating as an adult, which I think a lot of adults are exploring, is who am I truly as an individual? Or who do I truly desire to be, as opposed to what everyone else thinks I should be? And that's that was my childhood, of not feeling able to be authentically Leo, with my wide array of emotional expressions and my wildness as a 8, 9, 10-year-old boy, really just trying to fit in.
You shared a lot of beautiful things there. Thank you.
Thank you.
To kind of take some of those things and run with them. So you talked about being a chameleon. You talked about this travel bug that you got and the ability to fit in any place that you were at. And I'd love to jump a little bit of a timeline, which is to you satisfying this, or maybe satiating this travel bug. Maybe the way that you bridge that is sharing the conversation that you had about not following in your father's footsteps, and then how that led you to what came to be known as the Good Vibes Road Trip.
Well, as a military kid, as most military kids are pretty much bred to also join the military. And again, it makes a lot of sense. I completely understand where my dad's coming from when he was telling me, and even his resentments or regrets around it. The military does provide a lot of benefits for adulthood. I mean, you literally, for the most part, don't have to worry about much. They provide the housing, utilities, and support your family, and you get decently paid, health benefits, like all of these things make so much sense for someone who's 18 years old, who doesn't know what the fuck to do with their life, to sign the dotted line. And for me, it just never made sense. And to this day, I feel like I never could put myself in a situation to be a soldier along those lines. I mean, those who know me know that I love to battle in the sense of like what's right. But will I do things that aren't in alignment with me and potentially completely against my values? I can't. I just can't. And I know I can't. As a young child, I knew I couldn't. And so when I turned 18, my dad thought I was going to be joining the military, just like all of my friends, literally all of them. I'm pretty sure in my friend group, I'm the only one that didn't join the military out of high school. That was a difficult conversation to have because it was just pure disappointment for my dad, in the sense of, well, then what the hell are you going to do? We don't know any other way in their minds. And so that led me to standing in my truth, battling in my own way, my own war. And I stood my ground, and my dad was not happy about it. And for the most part, neither was my mom, because now my dad was very unhappy. Because in their minds, this was the whole reason they came to America, was to give me this opportunity. And in my mind, I was like, there's so much other opportunity outside the military that clearly you guys haven't been exposed to. And so I had to just create my own way. And what I did was, after I graduated, I tried. My dad told me he wasn't going to support me financially for the most part when it came to certain things, because I chose not to do the military. And luckily, I was local in the sense where I could get, when it came to college, my tuition was local based. So I tried it, and even though I knew it wasn't going to work, I felt like I had to, because I wasn't joining the military, and I went to college, and then eventually I got academic probation because it's just not my scene. And it's not necessarily not my scene, is it doesn't make sense for a young adult who does not know themselves to, one, jump straight into something like the military without knowing what they truly want to do, or two, sign up for a very expensive college and take these next couple of years spending that money while still trying to figure out who they are. But I went the route and I tried. And all I did was brought me closer to the beach, and all I did was surf and basically got kicked out of college. Tried community college, didn't work. And then I just went into the workforce. And with Hawaii, there's pretty much two options for the workforce. It's either you're in construction or you're in some degree of service. And majority of that is either hotels or restaurants. And of course, I went the direction of the restaurants because I wanted to make a lot of money. And tourism is prime here in that sense. And as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, I was banking, making tips. And eventually, I hit this road where I was like, if I continue on this path, because I can see it all around me, this is all I'm going to do. There's no room for growth. Do I really want to be a GM of a restaurant? At one point, I thought I did, and then I watched the GMs live their life, and I was like, fuck no, they are so stressed, and they don't see their families. And again, one of the biggest reasons I chose not to join the military is, yes, one, I don't like being told what to do, especially to do something that I don't agree with. And two, is you don't have a choice to stay or go if you're asked to be deployed. And thankfully, a lot of my dad's deployments happened earlier at my age. And during the later times, he got shore duty, which means he never got deployed. But all around me, I had to see my friends suffer because their dads would be gone 8 months out of the year, either every year or every other year. And that was heartbreaking to see. And for me, I didn't like that idea. I didn't like the idea of not being able to be accessible to my family by choice. And that's one of the main, pretty much, reasons that I chose to go my own way. And when I hit that wall of realizing that I was going down this path that didn't seem very fulfilling, I decided to move to Southern California. And this is a whole nother story in itself because it was on a whim. And the way I did it was I told my friend, we were playing poker one night, and I was like, hey, I feel like going to California and checking out the scene. And I wanted to know if they wanted to go with me for like 2 weeks or however long it was to go on quote unquote vacation together to see if but in the back of my head, also them, could see ourselves moving to California. And to make this part of the story short, they said yes, and I booked everything super cheap, which was a big mistake because where we ended up basically staying for 2 weeks was a backpacking motel in the heart of Inglewood, Compton, California. So imagine this, 4 20-year-old, 19-year-old dudes. Yeah, all of them have never been to this location, including myself, completely unknown. We land, and we thankfully had a friend who let us borrow a car. We're driving, and the first thing we see down the street is somebody, like a body, tied to a computer chair that got burnt. And we stopped at a Starbucks, and everything was glassed up to order food. And that was the rude awakening of welcome to California. And I'm pretty sure it was the first or second night we were driving back to the hotel, and we made a U-turn, and we got pulled over. And this is in Compton now. And the cop goes, you guys are from somewhere far away. What the hell are you doing in this area? We gave him our IDs, and he's like, yep, you guys don't belong here. What are you doing here? And it was this moment of like, what are we really doing? Like, what's the point of this? Because a lot of our experiences are shocking. And we leaned into it, and eventually, we also did the tourist thing, but we found a job We found an apartment, and they gave us 2 months to come back, and that's what we did. And for this part again, like I lived in Southern California for almost 10 years doing this, and a lot of fun. I turned 21 in the mainland with my friends and got to experience living this adventure, going to Vegas, like all of these things, and eventually hit a wall again of realizing that I'm doing exactly the same thing essentially I was doing in Hawaii with no sense of direction. And the reason I moved to California was to go on an adventure. And during the last chapter of my time in California, I was managing a warehouse for Quicksilver, the surf company. At the same time, stepped into this small business idea that I really felt called to do, which not many people are going to know this pastry, but if you're from Hawaii, you absolutely know. And it's kind of ironic that my full name is Leonard. And what I did in California was I made and sold malasadas, just like Leonard's malasadas on Oahu. I did that for a year straight while I'm working my full-time job. So on the weekends, I was in the kitchen prepping at 2 a.m. to be ready by 6, all the way till I sold out around 4 or 5. And then Monday through Friday, I was working from like 3 a.m. to like 1, 2 o'clock every day. And I burnt myself out. And while I was going through the process of burning out, my relationship that I was in ended really ugly. And I had to question again, what am I doing with my life? And instantly I knew I was meant to go on an adventure. And there were 2 options that I came up with. And this was a very dark time in my life when my relationship ended and everything started falling apart. I moved out of my apartment condo, left her there with the condo, and I moved into my warehouse, and I lived out of my warehouse for a couple months except 1 or 2 people. No one knew. And this is for those of you in Southern California, downtown Fullerton was our warehouse in the industrial area, so no one fucking knew what was going on over there. And during those months, living really hard, drinking a lot, smoking a lot, came up with 2 ideas. First idea was to sell my car and take all the money that I had and buy a full-blown round-the-world ticket and go on an adventure like that. And the first place I was going to stop was Peru to do ayahuasca. And that was something that felt really aligned and excited me, and that's what I was going to do. Except plan B was to buy a van and acknowledge that I haven't even explored the mainland, which I now viewed as my backyard, because I was always so afraid of doing big things alone. I somehow convinced another 3 different friends to come with me. I wouldn't say I convinced them. I told them and I invited them. And I said if they wanted to come, to let me know, because if they chose to come, I wouldn't do plan A and I would do plan B. And all of them were like, no, we'll do the road trip with you. So I put the world travel to the side and bought a van. And we initiated this journey called the Good Vibes Road Trip. And the goal was to do a couple months traveling out of a van around wherever the journey took us. And all we knew the direction was to head north from Southern California and just go with it. And that led me to probably the most life-changing experience, or one of the first life-changing experiences that really shifted the way I viewed life, the way I navigated my life, and the decisions I made. Because one of the first things we did on that trip was intentionally go broke, all of us. So, granted, we drove from Anaheim. Within a week, we were in San Francisco. And in San Francisco, we're like, let's just blow it all. And at the time of our lives, we reached a point where my friends were inspired to go explore and try something new by themselves. We all acknowledged that there's an opportunity for us to go deeper into the uncomfortable. And what that did was one friend went up to Alaska. Another friend went to Hawaii to live on the beach, and my other friend went actually back home to Hawaii to reevaluate his goals. And I continued living out of the van, which led me to meeting more people. And eventually I got invited out to Montana to do a gathering of sorts. I met two friends while I was traveling, Ali and Noel. They were traveling out of an RV doing a documentary called Sonderlust, and they were interviewing people along their way of travels to capture stories. And the goal is that for them, everyone has an individual story that's pretty profound to share. In the journey of my own, they were recommended me, I guess, to connect. And they did a little interview, social media interview on me and documented it and compiled it into the documentary. And Montana was their kind of last hoorah and invited all the people that participated to come hang out. And so I sold my van and knew that this was the next opportunity for me to step into a whole new world of exploration and uncomfortability. And I flew out there and I basically traveled with them after Montana, which led me to experience Pine Ridge. Through them, they introduced me to a lot of foreign experiences for me. And one of those things were taking me out to Pine Ridge to see the reservation out there, which is considered one of the poorest reservations in the country. And they were connected with a lot of people who were finding ways to create resources and support for the communities out there. And one of those events were called the Unity Festival in the Black Hills. And that was my first introduction to festivals. And it inspired me to get more involved because I got really involved in that festival and I found a lot of passion in it, especially for the mission. And their goal was to not let the Black Hills go for sale. And that initiated me into a world of speaking up and fighting and activism, fine-tuning the way I could show up. And while I was traveling with them, I was also putting it out in social media that I was seeking to acquire and learn about land because I was inspired to create a retreat space for other people to explore their passions. And it was very loose at the time and not really clear, but I knew that that was the direction I wanted to go. And knowing that I didn't have the exact answers yet, but knew the first step, which was to step in as a student and learn as much as I could. So when the time came, I was prepared. And in that, I got invited to Southern Colorado to go check out this land. And this gentleman reached out to me saying that he had a couple acres of land that was something he was holding on to build something. And he heard of my story and thought I would be someone that could help him. And so I made my way down to Colorado Springs, where he eventually picked me up. And in that journey down to his house in Alamosa, he mentioned to me that he came to the conclusion that I might not be the right fit, or the land might not be the right fit for me, but he knew somebody that I needed to talk to and meet. And so the next morning he took me to this house in Del Norte, a really small town in southern Colorado, and it's in the middle of the desert, high desert. And I got introduced to someone who really impacted my life unexpectedly. And her name is Tetsuko of Cold Mountain. And she's a very well-known artist in her time, and also a strong proponent of the Buddhism movement that came out of Boulder, where she spent a lot of her time. And what I learned was I ended up at this lady's house, and she told me, before I told her who I was and what I was doing, that no one just ends up at her house without a reason. And there's no such things as coincidences. So she sat me down on her bed, and what I learned was she's a paraplegic from her armpits down for a majority of her adulthood. And she became a paraplegic when she was revolting against, I believe, the Vietnam War in New York. NYPD at the time, when they were doing a protest, pulled her off of an electrical transformer on the street, and she went headfirst into the ground and broke her neck and sued the police department and won, and took her money to Boulder, where she met the Rinpoche, who was called to introduce Buddhism to Colorado. And he, from my understanding, was also in a wheelchair, so connected with Tetsuko very deeply, and she became one of his main students. And when he passed away, she decided to relocate and ended up in Del Norte, because she had this dream of building a sanctuary space for people to find inner peace. And so I told her my story, and she started crying and essentially said, I've been waiting for you for 20 years now. And I was just blown away, and she curated this whole experience where essentially the next day for the next 3 nights. I ended up on her property of 40 acres in the middle of the Bloodless Valley is what they called it. And it's in the middle of nowhere. And there's a yurt, and I spent 3 nights there by myself with my puppy at the time. And I had to tune into the land and figure out if this was the right spot. And essentially, it felt very, very much so. And we made an agreement that after the next winter, I would come back and I would start building with her. My job was to pull the team together, and we'd work together on resources and make it happen. And there was my mission. I found the land, a person who believed in me, and essentially now the rest was up to me to make it happen. And in that process, everyone heard about what had happened to me. Colombia popped up into my radar. And how that unfolded is there was a gentleman named Ryan Wilson, who was the owner of the property in Colombia. He was doing a contest online and through a number of online communities, and promoting that he was going to bring one person up, all expenses paid, if they're the right fit, to help them build this retreat space in the middle of the jungle. I had a number of friends reach out to me and tell me that I needed to do this, and I refused because I was like, now I have a mission and I'm very clear on what I have to do, and I don't have time to go to another country, let alone spend 3 months. It happened over and over again, and eventually I gave in one night. It was like a 4-layer contest, and the first round was choose a random number, and my number was the last one closest to that specific number, and I just remember it equating to, I'm pretty sure it was 2974. It had to equal 1111 in my mind. And that happened to be the 10th number picked, which moved on to the next round. And the next round was a Q&A. He sent a list of questions, and I did my questions. And 10 minutes later, after I did my questions, he called me on Facebook saying, hey, I read your stuff, and I'm going to tell you that we'd love for you to come to Colombia, but we were seeking a chef to help us cook, and you're clearly not a chef, but you have a skill set that we absolutely desire and want. So we're going to choose you outside of the contest and still bring a chef on. How soon can you get out here? And I said I needed to reevaluate some things because of what's going on in my life when it came to this opportunity. Like, I talked to Tetsuko, and she's like, you have to do this. Like, it's the perfect training scenario for you to learn how to build something in the middle of the jungle with very minimal resources. You're going to learn a lot. You should go. And it's going to be during the winter, so why not? And so with her blessing, I went for it. And about almost a month later, I flew out to Colombia without really knowing what I was getting into. And 2 weeks before I flew out, Ryan calls me and says, hey, I'm just going to inform you that, yes, we are building a permaculture retreat space in the middle of the jungle with the hopes of making some kind of bed and breakfast or hostel dynamic. But our main mission of what we're creating is an ayahuasca retreat that we plan on doing every month. Then there was the clear answer for me as to why I was going to Colombia. And to full circle back to the beginning of when I went on my journey and chose the van as opposed to traveling the world, when I would share my story with everyone about Plan A, those who knew would chuckle at me and say, oh, it wasn't your time, but you'll know. She'll come find you and let you know it's time to take medicine. And I trusted that, and I believed in that because it was very clear it wasn't my time. And effortlessly, she presented herself to me. And I didn't have to pay anything to get there. All I had to do was say yes. And that began my 3-month journey, spending time in Colombia, in the middle of the Sierra Nevada mountains, right outside of the beautiful town of Minca in the jungle, pretty much 2 hours into the jungle, up the road, and spent 3 months living in a tent and shitting in a hole and building, working with the land, farming, doing structures, and essentially doing multiple ceremonies of ayahuasca. And that was another key factor of my life that shifted and changed so much and introduced me to one of my favorite places in the world, which is Minca and the country of Colombia. And if you've never been, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go. And it's one of those things when I had the opportunity to take and I would share, everyone just shared fear with me about how dangerous it is, and it's not the best place to go considering I go without plans and very minimal money. That was that the smartest decision I should take, and intuitively it was absolutely a full fuck yes. And I don't look back, because what I've learned is the places that people fear the most that tell you not to go is the place you should absolutely go. Absolutely. And Granted, as a father now, I'd question that. I'd have to really sit with that. But in that time frame of my life, everywhere that I was told not to go and I ended up going was probably the most magical, influential experiences I've ever had. And the people there are the sweetest, most loving people, and just love that you're there. I just love Colombia so much, and it's a place that I hold dearly in my heart. And it introduced me to a whole different level of spirituality and community and just rawness of the human experience in land, because it's very minimal out there. And the local community out there is just so special and so loving. And it reminded me of Hawaii in so many ways. And that's Colombia, and I've gone back another time since. I continue to hope to return on a consistent basis as it continues to evolve and unfold, since the retreat space has evolved and grown pretty much in ways that I couldn't comprehend, because again, I was there when there was nothing, like literally nothing. That ridge was nothing except raw land. We lived it. We lived that lifestyle for a good 3 months, and everyone who was there, I know, their lives changed. But yeah, that's Colombia. And ayahuasca, which I think at some point we should have our own little episode of what ayahuasca has done for us, because that's still a conversation that is becoming more normal, but the curiosity also is getting stronger and it's becoming more available, which also borderline makes it that much more questionable and dangerous if you're not in the right mindset.
There's a lot of things you shared that I think are important. One is, you were talking about this plan A versus plan B, and your friends or community were saying that when you are ready, that grandmother ayahuasca will present herself. And I think it's an important thing for people to know and hear in this psychedelic revolution that we're experiencing is the idea of non-forcing. Mm-hmm. Because that is a door that opens oftentimes are not ready to walk through. Mm-hmm. And I think it's beautiful that you surrendered that, and then she came back to you in a very roundabout, mysterious way. Mm-hmm. And to that point of the following the mystery, I think on face value, a lot of people, and maybe you don't fall into this category, but the idea of if someone told you what you'd be up to, of 3 months living in a tent on a mountain ridge, shitting in a hole, most people might be like, nah. And maybe you would be in that boat. I'd probably be in that boat. And yet this idea of leaning into the unknown and seeing what life has for us is such a beautiful gift. And where I want to take this next, you talked about going to Colombia and re-engaging with this old way of life, the simple life, and farming and rising with the sun and meeting the indigenous elders. And you spoke earlier about Pine Ridge and the reservation, and I would love to take this as a segue to the Cannon River.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely tied in together, because as soon as I left Colombia, my mission was to get back to Colorado. And this is where, again, the unexpected happens and the reality of life on its own timeline. And we're just here to kind of navigate that and ride it and learn what's controllable and what's not. So when I got back from Colombia, I went right back into reconnecting with my community and traveling and hopping festival to festival, helping out where I could, finding ways to make money as well. And the goal was to make it back to Colorado after the land has thawed. And so because I had some time, I got to experience more festivals with friends and experience and reconnect with people in a really profound way and share my journey. And in the process of getting to Colorado, because we were actually making our way there, Tetsuko passed away. And that shifted everything, because there's a whole story behind her land and how she was keeping it secret for protection of it. And there was the goal was, when I returned back that second time, was when we would officially sit together and sign over the deed to the property to me and make everything official. And outside of us two, there's no documentation or proof that that was the agreement. And I didn't make it back to Tetsuko's in time before she passed, and it became very clear in that moment that idea essentially had to be let go. From my understanding, her kids wanted to sell the property, and I wasn't someone that they trusted, of course. At the time, I had dreadlocks. I was pretty much a street kid traveling around. I just got back from Colombia, so I looked even more like coming straight out of nature, and comfortable with it, and knew that there was going to be a lot of judgment with the way I was carrying myself and living. And so I still made it back to Colorado. I went to the land. I didn't tell the kids I was going. I had the key to the yurt and knew from memory how to get there. And I took a couple of my friends and a girl I was seeing at the time, went to the land and spent a week there and closed the door. Did a lot of sitting with the land, a lot of crying, a lot of hiking, and went through the process of connecting with Tetsuko and acknowledging her role in my life and what she did. And I can't put a value on that. And it became very clear that that also was the main reason she was introduced in my life, was to show me that anything is possible. And so I let that go. I let this 40 acres in the beautiful, pristine, bare land of Saguache County in the Bloodless Valley, I let it go. And as I was letting it go, I went back to the yurt, and I got a message from good old Uncle Joe, and he said, "Where am I at?" And I told him I'm in Southern Colorado, and he said he needed my presence in Boulder for what was going to be launched from the West Coast as the Up to Us caravan during, the 2016 elections, where Bernie Sanders was making his run. And at this time, Shailene Woodley was organizing this movement, and they needed some people to come in and help facilitate and organize the flow, because essentially what we were doing was we were going to road trip with hundreds of people around the country, stopping in different cities to activate each city with our events and build awareness around Bernie Sanders. And that was my first introduction to the political scene. And one of the final stops was the DNC in Philadelphia, I believe it was. And that opened up all of our fresh eyes to a lot of what's happening behind the scenes there, because we had people on the inside kind of sharing with us. And through that process, Shailene was also connected to the Pine Ridge Standing Rock community, and they were preparing to go to battle, essentially, to protest against building a pipeline straight through their reservation. And what's fucked up is the pipeline was supposed to be built through a regular neighborhood outside of the reservation. But the people in those neighborhoods revolted, and instead of putting it through their neighborhoods, they put it straight through the sacred lands of Standing Rock and the river, Cannonball River. And that whole area and history is very sacred to the Lakota out there. And it was also, a premonition of what was about to happen, and it was becoming real. Everything they were told from generations was actually starting to happen. And they knew that this was it. And so what happened is, because we were already all together doing this road trip and it was coming to an end, because clearly we lost. I wouldn't say we lost, but it became very clear that we weren't going to get any further than we were. And we got invited through Shailene Woodley to show up at Standing Rock at the Cannonball River for the first time in their history, to have outsiders help them to fight and protest. And that launched the Standing Rock revolution of 200 people fighting against the company to 10,000 people in the span of a weekend. And we got there before everyone else got there, and we got to help kind of figure out layouts and goals and ideas and infrastructure. And then out of nowhere, I remember coming out of a water prayer, and everyone was headed to the main road, and all of a sudden there was just this, what felt like an army, which was led by like 20 Native Americans on horses, followed by buses, followed by people walking to join the protest. And it was probably the most impactful experience I've seen, got to witness on my own, of these people and community truly standing up for what they believed in. And so I spent a couple months in Standing Rock doing my best at some of the hardest times I've ever experienced, to be able to witness the corruption and the fucked upness of the way the companies were navigating things. I mean, if you still remember, there are times where it actually made mainstream news. Hundreds of people were standing on the line trying to prevent the bulldozers from coming, and they would send the police and Army National Guard with water cannons and tear gas and literally fucking shoot them in 32-degree weather. And it was insane. Insane. And it was a eye-opening experience. And miraculously as well, that's where I ended up conceiving my son, right on the banks of the Cannonball River and my partner at the time, when we pulled up to the property in the middle of the night, there was this baby white horse that ran against the fence as we were driving. And it was like, wow, we're about to walk into something really special. And that was kind of the sign of what's to come for us, which was this beautiful white horse. It was so majestic. And when we left pregnant. And that's where my son gets his middle name, which is Cannon, for the Cannonball River. And that Cannonball River was really profound for both of us in terms of learning how to stay connected with our truths and with the land. And Standing Rock, I know for a lot of people who were there, a lot, it changed our lives. And again, they still built the fucking pipeline. And so a lot of ways we felt defeated, but it also was training for a lot of people to understand what actually happens when you're up against something like that and what actually needs to be done on your end in order to either be kept safe or stand in your power and not back down. But that was Standing Rock, man, was a crazy, crazy experience and a lot of beautiful people. It was something out of like a Western movie, dude. Like a whole field that was bare with one little fire pit, a couple of tents turned into the city of teepees with multiple fires and multiple chants happening at the same time and drums. And you're just looking over and you're like, wow, this is fucking insane. And it was the precursor to a lot of what I'm seeing today from an observation standpoint. And I think of that experience a lot, actually, as I get older and as now I have my son Zen. And I think back to that time and those people. And a lot of those people have perished. A lot of those people are no longer around. And a very special time in my life and a very special place to be able to have the opportunity to experience and learn from. There really is nothing like it other than that. If you want to talk about American history and what actually happened, those are the fucking people you want to talk to. Those are the people you want to learn from. Because the shit we hear in our history classes are not the fucking truth. That is a fact. You can fact check me. But go talk to those people who lived here before the United States. That shit is crazy. Even Hawaii, same thing. Those are some topics we need to discuss because only now, especially with Hawaii, it's something that's becoming more common conversation around as to how Hawaii became Hawaii illegally. And they took the same process from what they did with the Native Americans. And the natives are still suffering to this day and forgotten about. It really helps you reevaluate the comforts we live in and the blessings we are provided by just the way we were raised. Life-changing.
Yeah, on that note, right, the point of the way we were raised, I think that's a perfect transition to really starting to discuss the idea of you becoming a father and having a conscious choice in the way that you raise your son Zen, and letting the backdrop of your experiences be what inform who you want to be and show up for as your father to him.
Fatherhood, and I'll just speak for myself, but I know every parent will resonate, is most parents will resonate, because not everybody wants to be parents, I get it. It is the most profound experience for me as a human and adult to have in my life is to birth and raise a kid. There really isn't anything that really compares to it. And the biggest shift for me while I was on my travels and journeys and adventures, it was very much focused on how can I show up and save what I can save, in the sense of where can I help. And when I became a father, it shifted from this idea of doing things for me to feel accomplished. In those contexts, it shifted to, wow, everything I have been doing has been for the future of my kid, the betterment, the health, the safety. And it's been a journey, and it's really humbling, but it also makes things very clear. And so for me, having the opportunity to bring my son into the world the way we did, with our experiences of Standing Rock and then eventually home birthing him in Nevada City, and then taking him on the journey with us around the world, has been something that was the most amazing. He got to go and experience Colombia with me at like 2 years old. He also got to do Bali, and he also traveled around the country. And the one thing that I knew was my focus as a parent and as a father, which was the one thing I knew of why I didn't join the military, was I'm going to allow myself to give as much presence and attention and focus to my son as he's growing up, and just be there for him. And that's what I did for the most part of my ability. And again, I'm not perfect. At the same time, I know for a fact I did my best. And the way I've chosen to raise my son is just like any other Aquarius would, which was outside the box. We homeschool. We don't necessarily have a strict schedule or routine. And the most important thing is creating an emotional, safe, and as a father, one of my main focuses is creating a safe environment for my son to fully be himself, feel, and eventually be safe enough to share. And it's been a very powerful journey. He's 7 now, and he's way beyond his years. And he's a lot of fun, and he's still a kid. And I feel like he's, for the most part, a true representation of Zen. And his full name is Zenith, which is inspired by Zenith, which is the apex of consciousness, or the peak of a mountain. And combine that with the energy of Zen, that's my boy. Pretty much. A little too smart sometimes, but very wise. And yeah, now as being a father of a 7-year-old and going on to a little over a year now of being a single parent and co-parenting, it's been a journey. And a lot of times it's been hard, and a lot of times it's been beautiful. And I'm just grateful that he is the way he is, because he makes my life easier just by being himself. And we're so accepting of each other that I look forward to growing up older with him, to continue to build off of this and share and learn from one another, because I'm always learning from that kid. And as a parent and as a father, I think if you can approach it from the lens of being a student as opposed to the parent, your kid will teach you how to be the best parent ever, just by being themselves. And the hardest part is rewiring your brain based on the way you were raised by your parents, to understand that the way you need to show up for your child is more than likely going to be different than what you needed or what you received. And that's been a fun journey, in the sense of, if you're not so hard on yourself and you're willing to experiment and allow yourself to make mistakes, you're setting a great example for your kid.
Yeah, it's been beautiful over here to watch the relationship between you and your son, between a man and a boy, and the opportunity that you get to be as a model. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which is, your kids will not likely listen to you, but they will invariably become you. And you, Leo, have been a testament to doing the work so that your son doesn't have to. And that doesn't mean he won't have his own work, but it means he won't have to do your work.
Mm-hmm.
How often parents want to give their kids what they never got, meanwhile never giving it to themselves first.
Yeah.
And it's a tough thing. I can only imagine what it's like as a parent to feel selfish in giving themselves something before their children. But it is such a beautiful opportunity to see that when you take care of yourself, which, you have your Friday self-care routines and men's group and all this stuff, counsel with me, and this opportunity for you to clear your own baggage and energy instead of dumping it onto him to sort out.
That's something we don't talk about enough normally as parents in general. It became very clear for me that what I didn't want was to pass on to my son the bullshit that I've been holding and not being able to work through. That's based on my own upbringing, my own traumas, my own beliefs. And what I desire for him is to have his own set of problems to navigate that has come up from him, not directly from me. examples of that for people to relate, I guess, is like anger, holding on to anger as a parent and having reactions around anger eventually will teach your kid to also have the same reactions. And if you're not in tune with your own anger, then you're not going to be aware of what you're passing on to him or her. And there's many variations of that. And the most important one for me is that he feels safe completely being himself. If not in the outside world, which will be something he has to navigate on his own, but for sure in our four walls, when he's with me, wherever that is, he has the freedom and safety to be authentically himself, no matter how big, how small. Where my role comes in supporting that and nurturing that is allowing it and having conversations with him when he feels ready to or open to. I really think emotional intelligence is going to be the high value of individuals in the very near future, especially with the upcoming generation, because they're so in tune with it that I think the problems that we're experiencing as adults in our generation, they're going to have all the solutions for. And I want him to feel safe exploring so that way when he has ideas and solutions, he's willing to explore them openly and then eventually share them and collaborate.
Yeah, I really like what you said there about anger, especially for us as men. Right, when we were children, we were forced into timeout.
Right.
Oh, you're throwing a tantrum? Go to your room.
Yep.
And for you to have created this place for him to be with his emotions and for you to be close, to let him know and for him to understand that daddy's right there if he wants that support. It reminds me back to a very just eye-opening and life-changing experience I had between you and him and I and Amber, my partner, where he was angry.
Mm-hmm.
I was super frustrated. His marble set fell over, and for him to storm off into the bedroom to feel his emotions, and then to come back out and to share his anger with you, to trigger your anger, of my guess is not being a good enough dad in his eyes and all this stuff. And then for us to come together as a family and to help him process that, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, to have him channel that frustration towards me, because Uncle Scott's the guy he wrestles with. And so for him to, and then through Amber to give me a pillow so he could start hitting it and punching it and letting out his fury and his screaming, and then to just burst into tears and then to surrender back into your arms. And to watch his tears erupt and you sitting behind him witnessing that and your tears erupt. And to see how many men we've sat with in circle, whether it's a men's group, a retreat, or otherwise, where their father did not show up in that way.
Yep.
That we did not have a village to hold us in these big feelings, and so we stuffed them down. And now we spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on things like therapy and plant medicine and breath work and circle work, just to try and touch that part of us that was so deeply wounded.
Yep.
And to do this work in real time, I get to see the joy that he is naturally in your presence. He doesn't have to be afraid of feeling a type of way. And that doesn't mean it comes easy, right? That's a dance that you navigate on a daily basis when you're with him. And it's a beautiful model for the world, I believe. I'm blessed to be close coupled to that and very excited to see you begin to share that more with the world.
It's so clear that fathers in general lack support.
100%.
And because of the way we're hardwired, there's so much that fathers carry that they don't speak of. Fully leaning into embodying this lone wolf syndrome of doing it all yourself and putting a smile on, what I call the old paradigm expectation of put your nose down and grind. You'll eventually get through it, is not something I want to lead by example for. And I see so many fathers who are stuck in it. And that's where a lot of my calling currently has been focused on, is how can I help these fathers out? And the answer right now is as simple as creating a safe space to be witnessed, because there are way too many of us doing it alone and slowly dying inside, all with the sacrifice and the heart of trying to keep it together for your family. And again, the old paradigm in the sense of what's more valuable for your family and child, for you to keep your mouth shut and hold it all in and sacrifice everything and then eventually crumble, or to just be completely transparent with the process of the true human experience as a father. And, that latter part scares a lot of people because it shows a side that they label as weak. Therefore, they don't want their partner, they don't want their child to see them as weak. But as we're learning today, true strength is in that world of sharing that which scares us the most, or that hurts us the most, or holds us back the most. And in my mind, if I'm able to live that by sharing it, it's one less thing that my son will have to navigate as well. Because then he'll understand that he holds the true power and no one else controls that.
Reminds me of this quote that I have, which is, strength is not defined by how much you carry, but rather how much you're willing to set down. And I think that's the perfect segue for us to jump into the next topic, which is really what you alluded to there is, as a father, do you just shut up and carry it and deal with the ramifications and conform, or do you stand in your power? And that really brings us to the next topic, which is you moving back to Hawaii and the age of COVID, which in a way is the death of the old. It's the end of the paradigm. COVID was kind of the cutscene into the new chapter of the way of life, and I believe there's a lot in the way in which you navigated that, both for yourself, for your family, professionally and personally, that speaks to what you were willing to do to stand in what you believe in, even at the expense of what it cost you.
COVID was a unique time for everybody. I happened to be in the island of Lanai for the latter half of COVID. First half, we were in the process of relocating back to Hawaii and had gotten a job in Maui. And a week into my job, pretty much the majority of the island of Maui shut down. So I had to return back to Oahu. And at that time, my partner and my son were staying with my mom while I was getting everything settled. And so I returned back to Oahu to be with them. And everything kind of shifted. Everything shut down. And towards the end, my ex got the opportunity to take a position teaching yoga in Lanai, which was an opportunity to get off of Oahu, which we were both struggling with. I mean, back then, you couldn't even go to the beach or go in the water without getting a ticket. Of course, there were ways people got sneaky like us and found some beaches to roam around on, but like Waikiki or anything, you would literally get a ticket, which was just bizarre.
What was the ticket fine?
I don't remember. It was like $75 probably.
Wow.
Something ridiculous. Maybe even in the hundreds. I'm not sure. But it was, people were getting tickets. And at the time, of course, my mom was in a lot of fear of us getting in trouble. So it was nice to get off the island. And there was that lull where things started opening up again, but kind of shut down again. And the second part, I was able to also get a position at this luxury wellness retreat in the hills of Lanai. And then fast forward to mandatory vaccinations. One of the main owners of this retreat wellness space was the same very doctor on CNN telling everyone to get vaccinated, who was also the doctor of Steve Jobs, which is what inspired this idea to start a wellness space, kind of his last dream and wish, from my understanding. And the owner of the island of Lanai, Larry Ellison, what's up, bro, partnered up with the doctor and opened up this space. And so it was very clear to me that things were going to start getting a little weird because I was refusing to get vaccinated, with the support of my family and my mom. My mom believed that my sister herself had some reactions to vaccinations as a baby. As we all know, we get way more vaccinations right when you're born than you need to. And my mom kind of held this narrative in her head for the whole time that could have been something that influenced that. My sister was also prematurely born. And as an adult, she has a couple of what we call disabilities, special needs. And that time frame of being in Lanai and essentially being singled out because it ended up only being 2 of us who didn't get vaccinated and the rest did. I couldn't. There was at one point where things got a little hairy and I was like, you know what? I'm questioning the idea of just getting vaccinated myself just to keep things calm with my family and not having to move and all of these things. It crossed my mind. And then I had an experience. I was doing the operations here at this retreat space. Really beautiful, fancy, bougie layout. And I was basically running the whole property operationally and taking care of the massage therapists and the practitioners. And I would do my part to check in on them. And there was this one moment where one of our massage therapists, I walked into the massage hale and she was sitting there and I could tell something was off. And I asked her what's going on. And she told me that she was feeling off since this morning and her left arm was feeling a little numb. And instantly I was like, jump in the fucking van. We're going to the hospital. I asked her, what do you think initiated this? Like I said, I started feeling it a couple days after I got vaccinated. And the whole island, because of Larry Ellison's connections and resources, the whole island was given free vaccinations. And because there's right under 3,000 people, it was pretty easy for them to get everyone vaccinated and on board. And she was one of the people who did it because they were told, if we don't, you can't work here anymore. There's a lot of weird situations because Four Seasons is also a property there, but they couldn't mandate it because if they did, they'd have to do it worldwide at all their properties, and that's just not possible. So we shared a property with Four Seasons, and this is one of the hypocrisies that I, continued to push against was you have a whole crew of 100 something at Four Seasons sharing the same property as us, and they're not vaccinated, and we have to get vaccinated. And it's because, we're interacting with guests in an intimate way and face to face and massage and blah, blah, blah. And it still didn't quite make sense. I had many, many meetings with, I sound like Trump when I said that, but I had a lot of meetings with the designated doctor of our company, the CEO, the GMs, and I just stood my ground. And what ended up happening in October of that year was I was forced to quit, also fired, with the premise that they respected me and understood my decision that I would be allowed to collect unemployment for my family and figure it out. And when that came down to it, they actually lied, fought against my claim. And that was kind of the reality for me of how weird things are in our world. And we lost our house because we were told we had to move because all the housing there is provided for by the company because Larry Ellison pretty much owns all the houses. We picked up and went back to Oahu and eventually made our way to Pennsylvania and spent a couple weeks there and then made our way back to Maui. Yeah, that was a really hard time. And now to hear more and more stories of these people who lost their jobs, including the military, is just fucking bizarre. And then fast forward to today, to the facts and the realities of what actually happened and what that vaccination did. We essentially were fucking right. And I didn't get an apology. I didn't get anything. And many people didn't. So it's like...
Well, you didn't get myocarditis.
It's true. This is true. And I did get to witness someone have a borderline stroke because of it. 2 people, essentially. And it was like, that's it. So there's a love and heartbreak experience of Lanai because I loved living in Lanai. It's one of those islands here in Hawaii that is very unique and special. The energy there, the vibe was very community oriented. Everyone knew each other. It was really special for my son to spend some time there because it was so focused on the kids that even if your kid was walking on the sidewalk next to the road, the cars would slow down just to be hyper aware and protective. And it was one of the most beautiful communities I've ever got to experience, from the culture to the environment. Probably one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever swam at and some of the best camping. And so COVID for me was that experience. Was this blessing of experiencing Lanai and then the heartbreak of what happens when you stand in your truth. and you deal with those consequences. And I'm proud I did. I'm really proud I did, because I wouldn't have ended up where I am today. I just know a lot of people, and I'm surprised there's not a lot more people talking about what they went through when they chose not to get vaccinated. And there's a lot of people who got fucked over because of it. And then fast forwarding again to today, and the way information is coming out about the consequences of taking the vaccine, where's the fucking accountability? People's lives got rocked because of that fear and because of that choice of not getting the vaccine. And again, like, looking in hindsight, I just don't quite understand how people were able to get away with certain things like that. And I get it, it goes both sides, but I'm sure another 5-10 years down the line, when we get more scientific information about what COVID was, and because only recently, a few months ago, I saw that they categorize COVID as the flu now, right? Like, it's basically the flu, which is what everyone was assuming. And if you have COVID, you treat it like the flu. And so, again, time goes on, we hear about things that the health risks that people are experiencing now because of getting that vaccine. It definitely puts a concerning question mark in my eyes of if and when something like that happens again, how can I ever trust you guys? Which I didn't in the beginning, so you just proved my point. And that sucks that this is the reality, especially having a child. That was a really rough experience in the sense of the fear-based projection that was happening across the country, to the point of where they wouldn't let people go in the ocean, not get in the sun. We're one of the most healthiest states in probably the world, in the country. And it's because we get the sunshine, it's because we have the ocean, and it's because we have the ability to access those things pretty freely. And COVID tested that. And there were quite a majority of the people who listened, and some of us also questioned. So it's like, you know, as an adult and as a parent, you start to learn the gray lines of what's right and what's wrong. One thing I'm really doing as a parent for my son is teaching him to think for himself and to question everything. I think we should be questioning everything, especially at this point in our lives and this time of our lives. So we have a right, and it's almost our responsibility, to question everything, because everything is being shown as fucked up and false, and we've trusted it. So yeah, that's kind of my rant on COVID. It was difficult and a beautiful experience, but one of those things that influenced a huge crossroads in my life, and I chose my integrity. It wasn't an easy journey to do. I was definitely frowned upon by a lot of people I looked up to, and I'm so glad I didn't, because who knows, knowing my family's kind of health history, how that would have really affected me. And oddly enough, my mom had my back through the whole process, as much as she was scared that I was going to get fired because of that whole mentality of being stuck out. And that was one way to stick the fuck out. Yeah, I'm curious how it all unfolds from here on out, knowing that more answers and truth about that whole process is coming out, and also being suppressed at the same time. So yeah, rough times and eye-opening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Speaking on the rough times, we met at the beginning of COVID.
Yep.
Because of the rough times that were happening in our community.
Mm-hmm.
For other reasons than the opportunity to create a men's group to support fellow brothers through their difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I had talked a little while at the beginning of COVID, and then kind of fell off the mat for a little bit.
Yep.
Maybe like 8 months to a year. And then the next time we talked, you were in Lanai.
Mm-hmm.
And we did breathwork via Zoom. You
Mm-hmm.
were in your kitchen, I remember. I think Cass took Zenda on a walk.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the next time we chatted. And then the next time, I'm pretty sure, was you leaving me a voicemail on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
September 18th of 2023,
Mm-hmm.
Which started the whole journey that we're on now. So why don't you share a little bit of that story,
Yeah.
how that unfolded for you?
Yeah, a lot of life-changing experiences. August of 2023 was most definitely the most altering, other than becoming a father. No one can really prepare you to lose your mother. I was on vacation at the time, in the Outer Banks, visiting my son, and visiting with my ex's side of the family for a family vacation. August 8th, Tuesday morning, I think it was. I got a phone call and a bunch of texts from friends here in Maui asking if I was okay. And was like, what's going on? And then my ex also was getting a lot of notifications and saw the news, and we found out Lahaina was full blown on fire. And so I woke up to that news like feeling in shock, but in situations like that, it's pretty natural for me to figure out how to show up. And so I was strategizing, trying to see if and how to make it back to Maui to show up for my community. And staying in tune, because I used to work out in Kapalua, which you had to drive through Lahaina just to get to it. And we spent a lot of time in Lahaina as a family. And with my son, we do father-son dates there in downtown Lahaina, going out to eat at our favorite spots and seeing the people we know. Shortly after me trying to figure out like what's really happening with Maui, I get a phone call from my dad letting me know that my mom, and they're located in Oahu, my mom was in the ER. And he didn't quite know what was going on other than she was having stomach issues over the last couple weeks. My neighbor, the landlord, convinced my mom to go to the hospital. And so they drove her to the hospital, and right away they said she needed to do some kind of emergency surgery in her belly. So my dad called me, told me the situation, and there I was navigating what was happening in Maui, and also a deep knowing that something was really off with what was happening with my mom. And Maui's situation kind of went by the wayside for me, and by the end of the day, it was very clear to me to make my way to Oahu. And my dad told me to wait because he didn't know the severity. The doctor told me to wait. And then in the middle of the night, I got a phone call from the doctor. And he told me that it'd probably be best if I made my way. The surgery didn't go very well, and my mom was having complications. So I hopped on a plane, left my son with his mom, and came back alone to Oahu and saw my mom right away. And 4 days later, she passed away in the ICU. Then everything began to crumble in the sense where everything in my life was forced to change in its own ways. That was literally what felt like out of my control. And so I had to step up and help my dad with the whole process, and also start the process of rebuilding my life to involve my sister, because now I have become the main caretaker of my sister, which meant she was relocating to Maui with me eventually. I began to have a really hard time because I felt really alone in the process. My dad was doing his own thing respectfully. My sister was doing her own thing respectfully. And I was feeling very alone in my own process and feeling like I was carrying a lot and having a lot of responsibilities, which I did. Shortly after, the relationship with my son's mother fully deteriorated, and essentially they ended up not coming to Oahu to, one, either support me or two, celebrate my mom. So I went through a really heavy spiral of feeling abandoned and feeling a lot of sadness for losing my mom. And I knew at that point I was going to fall apart. And I also knew I needed to fall apart if I was going to make it through. One night was laying in the bed downstairs, which the bed's right next to a window, and right above the window is a little ledge of a lanai. And as I was laying there, distraught, so angry, and so sad, I could hear my sister talking on that balcony. She had no idea I could hear, and I don't think she cared if she did, if she knew. And what I could hear was she was having a full blown conversation with my mom. And if you look out the window, it looks like she's just talking to the stars, but she's talking to a specific star. And my mom and my sister have a dog named Lucky. So Lucky was hanging out with my sister, and my sister was telling Lucky about my mom and how she's okay. And she was telling my mom the plans that we were creating for her to move to Maui and what I was envisioning. And you could hear the excitement in her voice. And I was just sitting there pretty annoyed. I was annoyed because I was jealous that my sister was able to have a real conversation with my mom, and it felt like I couldn't. I did the only thing I knew that my mom would tell me to do, which was pray. And I laid there crying, and I prayed. And what I prayed for to God was, can I just talk with my mom like my sister does? Because I really need her support right now. And in that prayer, it shifted to just naturally talking to my mom, or attempting to talk to my mom. And what I told her was, I'm having a really hard time and everything is falling apart and I need help. I need support. And I don't really know what that looks like, but I need someone to help me through this process, or else it's going to get really bad, because I was losing everything. It was what it felt like. And while talking to my mom in that experience, your face popped up. And this acknowledgement and exhale of like, oh yeah, he would be the perfect person, in the sense of someone who I knew was safe, to who I knew was capable of supporting myself and my sister to a degree, to hold space for us. And I just knew your energy. And it was so clear that my mom was like, yeah, you need to contact him. And in the middle of the prayer, I snapped out of it and I wrote on my phone in the morning, call Scott. And the next morning I called and I left a voicemail letting you know my situation, and acknowledging that also it was almost like this divine perfection that you were also in heavy grief. And it made sense to me to propose this idea because at the same time, Maui itself was in heavy grief. And it felt so normal for me to be in grief, or it felt safe for me to be in grief on that island, and could only imagine the magic and support that you would also experience if you came to the island and allowed your grief to be fully present. And so I left a message and you called, and I basically proposed this idea that you come out to Maui on a one-way ticket. Verbally, I said for like 3 months till the end of the year, basically. But consciously thinking like he's not going to leave. Maui's going to capture him. And propose this conceptual idea of you coming to Maui with very minimal expectations, but knowing that you had everything you needed to be present and just show up as a brother for myself, for my sister, for yourself, and help each other kind of navigate the world of grief that we've acknowledged has probably been the most potent and important portal of our life, which has been the whole year of sitting, navigating, supporting, and really feeling it all in the realms of grief, which only birthed so many ideas and realities that we're now starting to pursue together and share. But yeah, that's what led me to giving you a call, was the loss of my beautiful mother.
Yeah, I don't think either of us could have seen could have imagined or dreamed what was going to come from that.
We're still learning.
Right. And this dance with grief and anger and disappointment and sadness and all the heavy feelings that come with grief. And in a way, for both of us to lose someone or something so dear to our heart, it was the acknowledgement of the passing of the childlike self of us,
Mm-hmm.
of the end of the old.
The initiation.
Right. The beginning of the new world, the new life. And I'd love to give you an opportunity to just kind of share what the last year has been like.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, it was fucking hard. It was brutal. Even with the support, like there was no bypassing the pain, the anger. It was just really difficult. And it was really difficult because intentionally and consciously, I chose to fully be in it, where most people would see that as the worst thing to do. And what I did was I quit my job shortly after you got here, and I was property managing at some other luxury resort here in Maui, and you were even here when I attempted to go back, and I was like, I can't pretend, and had a conversation with my bosses and told them the straight truth that I needed to focus on my family and focus on me and really take time to grieve and heal if I'm going to make it in the future, because I knew if I didn't, this was going to smack me and punch me and kick me years down the line in ways that I don't want to experience. So I cleared all my distractions. Granted, my son wasn't here either, so I really didn't have a choice but other than to be with it throughout the whole year of 2023. As we come on the tail end, we did nothing but feel it all. And, the experience led me to experimenting as well with different modalities and ideas for me to explore, to really reconnect with myself. And what opportunity presented was I had a blessing to start from scratch, from the ground up, from what it looks like, what it feels like, everything. And it wasn't something I was looking forward to. It was just the reality of what I had to do in those moments of acknowledging, it's not going to be the same anymore. I can't recreate what I had in the past, let alone do I really want to do that. And I spent the year tuning in with all my emotions, and grief led it. And grief was the most time spent for sure. And but out of the grief, anger was the one that was my biggest teacher over the last year, because I had a lot to be angry about. It was a really profound, difficult, not gentle, as much as I wanted it to be gentle. I had to face some hard truths in order for me to really rebuild. And thanks to your presence and your support, and more importantly, your brotherhood, we went through the process of rebuilding. Redid the house, redid the garage. The before and after of this garage is mind-blowing. And we introduced a cold plunge into the garage, a sauna, breath work, all of these things that helped the process of exploring our emotions. And there was a lot of yelling, a lot of tears, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of sadness. And it wasn't just me experiencing this, it was also you, and it was also my sister. And what we ended up creating was this really beautiful, sacred bubble of a house that evolved into the house of feeling, where the goal and the intention was to create a safe space for whoever was in the house to feel at any given moment. And this was really beneficial for my sister, because because I really feel like she benefited from what we created. She felt very supported by you and knew that I had her back, essentially. And it allowed her to grieve. And saw parts of my sister that I've never experienced before. And I also see a version of her now that I've never got to experience before. And all that is due to all of us taking this last year to heal and figure out how to start over. And starting over is kind of the energy we're in right now, where a lot of the last year of grieving and processing led to talks of what the new looks like and feels like, and what was truly in alignment with who we are, because I refuse to go back to a 9-to-5 job. And what does that look like? And for my sister, what does living her best life look like? Because as her big brother, that was my sole mission for her, was as her brother and caretaker, I'm going to take the responsibility of figuring out the equation for her to live her best life now that my mom is gone. And found a great program for her, a great community. And for the most part, she's set. We could use a little bit more support here and there for her outside of those things. But if I compared this life to her life pre-COVID, this life knocks out of the ballpark for her, and I'm sure she would acknowledge that too. She has so much sovereignty and independence and freedom to do as she pleases, within the realms of safety and respect, of course. But she's living a life that she's always wanted to. And now that, those have been most of the part taken care of, it shifts to me and you, to where you've been here for a year now, officially. And maybe 2 months ago, I started to come out of this grief cave. And the way I saw it was, through that whole year, I wasn't excited about anything. And the metaphor was, I couldn't see color. There was nothing that felt alive outside of this house to me, because this became the sanctuary and the safety that I didn't even want to leave. And then 2 months ago, I started to come out of it, and I started to see color again, and excitement, and inspiration, and dreams, and ideas. And so here we are today, not only sharing the journey, but right in the middle of it all, rebuilding our lives, starting from scratch. You started from scratch after selling your house in Ohio, which is something you actually fucking did, and made it official to be here and got a Hawaii driver's license, all of it. And so now we're here and we're committed. And I don't intend or have any idea of going anywhere else, because Maui has held us so fucking beautifully through this whole process. And it feels right for us to take what we've gained and experienced through grief to support Maui. She's definitely offering us a lot of opportunity to be of service to the community here regarding support in grief and community building. And in order to reach that point, we had to start over.
Yeah, what a year. Just this amount of change that we've gone through, both separately and together. It's something we couldn't even try to fabricate.
No.
It was literally took the full surrender, jump off the cliff, hope we can learn how to fly, or remember that we can, and all the things that came with that. I'd love for you to offer some perspective, words of advice, practical tools for anybody who's made it this far in the podcast. My belief and assertion is that they resonate with your story on some level, and whether it's starting over, grief, being a man who's been unsupported, or anything in between. Maybe they're just looking to have a good vibes life now. And for you to weigh in on, from your perspective, what looks like help for them, what could they do, practice new, etc.
The important thing is to allow yourself to feel it all. And it's probably the scariest part and the hardest, because you're not just going to feel the initial emotion. you're going to feel everything that's hiding underneath it, which is what most importantly needs to be felt. And it's a scary journey to go on and necessary. It'll make it a little easier to navigate that when you have support. And so the next, I guess, insight I could share is ask for support. Someone. And if you don't have anyone, go through your fucking phone list. Because someone on there is going to be willing to at least hear you out and get comfortable being heard and sharing what you're experiencing. I'll also encourage therapy. I think therapy is a really crucial one from a professional standpoint. And I've been someone that's continuously done therapy bi-weekly, if not weekly, for a number of years now. My therapist has been someone that's helped me through a lot as someone who's being outside of my personal bubble. But feeling it and having the resources for you to feel safe going into that black hole is just as important as feeling it. And someone to kind of check on you also in ways to make sure you don't get stuck. Because it's a very heavy experience to navigate the loss of someone you really care about, especially your mother. And then for me, my family structure crumbling as well. Those two initial things were definitely a lot to feel. But what was even harder was all the narratives and the trauma that was lying underneath it. That the death of my relationship and the death of my mother really brought up. Feeling it is the only way through it. I also encourage, if you're a brother out there, as foreign as this sounds, find a men's circle. There's a lot of potent experiences in medicine in men's circles, especially if you haven't done it at all. The initial first couple experiences are pretty profound. And the reality shift of that, you're not alone in what you're experiencing and feeling. You're alone because you carry it alone. But the reality is you're carrying it alone just as much as the person next to you is. It's just we don't really have this opportunity to actually speak on it. And men's circles is something I highly, highly encourage. Whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, see what that does for you. And I encourage the women too. They have women's circles. That's something I think is a resource and very important to have. But I think the biggest lesson for me is the support dynamic for sure. Because I wouldn't have been able to feel it in the way that I did without the support I had. And the only way to get support is ask for it. And the only way to build trust and safety is to ask for it. And eventually, someone will answer your call. And someone will be there for you. Which will only teach you also how to be there for yourself. So that way you don't become dependent on them. But at the same time, we desire so much to be witnessed and seen as much as we are scared to, that once we finally do it, there's something that happens in us that you can't really describe, especially as a man. When you grow up the way you do, lone wolfing it, putting your nose down to the ground and grinding, forgetting to look up to see everyone else is doing the grind too. I think that's the new paradigm. At least the first steps to reconnecting to the energy of community and village, because that's where we came from. His brotherhood was part of the culture. It's part of the village mentality. Brothers would go haunt, gather, ceremony together. The women would stay back, cook, take care of the kids. They had their community within the community. And if you look around today, we don't have that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that me and you have seen and also feel called to bring back into reality is a true essence of community. And it starts with us experimenting and modeling with each other, and then expanding that to other men, fathers, brothers out there to do it as well, and then continuing to ripple that out. I'll end it with what my therapist and Lanai told me before even any of this happened. Lanai is known as Ghost Island in the sense of where your shadows are going to come up on that island, because there's very minimal distraction, if any. And there's a history there of the story of Lanai. And during my time there, of course, I experienced a lot of shadows within myself, especially dealing with the vaccination and stuff. And what she told me is everyone has their own hell, and most people don't explore it. Most people avoid it. But eventually, at some point, you're called to dive in without a choice sometimes. And at the depths of this hell lies a treasure box. And if you're willing to be in hell long enough, which means to feel it all and learn and process what that hell is for you, you'll reach that treasure box. And that treasure box is the game changer. But you can only get there by allowing yourself to go in. I think it's time for us to acknowledge the hell that we hide in ourselves. And then finding ways to get the tools and resources and support to finally dive in there and start exploring what's going on down there. Because it's important and necessary and life-changing.
Well, and it's my last question, and you kind of answered it in a way, which was, what does it mean to embrace being human? And I think it's only in embracing that hell do we get the other half of the spectrum.
Yep.
What's the quote? It's like, religion is for people who are afraid of hell. Spirituality is for people who've been there. This opportunity to embrace the totality of the human experience, and that means widening the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
It means embracing the hell and being curious about why is it so hellish.
Mm-hmm.
And difficulty of that, to do that alone. I think it's very...
I don't think we're built to do it alone.
We're not. There's no way. I mean, as a baby, we would perish in the first 16 to 18 years of our lives alone. Like, we wouldn't make it. And so this separation that everybody's feeling, propagated by social, or perpetuated by social media, where we're so separate again. And it's only necessary so that we can come back together in unity and union, in togetherness, and the unity of community. I acknowledge you over the time I've known you to lean into that mystery and see what life has to offer you, as torrential and uncomfortable as it may be.
Mm-hmm.
It is absolutely necessary.
It's the human experience.
Right.
It made me think of the scene from Vanilla Sky. You can't truly appreciate and enjoy the sweet without tasting the sour. And I, my friend, have tasted all the fucking sour. So therefore, my life is fucking sweet. And it's so true. Like, you can't have one without the other. You can't have heaven without hell. You can't have light without dark. You can't have love without hate. And you can't have sweet without sour. And I encourage, if you want to make it a little bit more lighthearted, is eat as much lemons as you can. So that way, when you taste the sweet, you can really appreciate and acknowledge how sweet the sweet is. And that's the hell. That's the sour. That's the uncomfortability. That's the awkwardness. That's the unknown. And that's where all the healing, growth, and magic really happens. It's not when things are good. We learn the most when things are bad. Therefore, it teaches us how to navigate in life of good. So start making some fresh lemonade without any sugar and see what that does for you. And then add the sugar and see how good it fucking tastes. Actually, not the sugar. Add honey.
Is there anything else you would like to add or to close with?
Yeah, I'll say this because I think it's something that's a theme right now, and I see a lot of people trying to figure it out too. I'm a strong supporter and believer that it's okay to start over. And if you're questioning in your life about starting over, whether it's a career, whether it's a new place, I think we're meant to shed the old in order to allow the new. I encourage anyone and everyone to lean into this concept of starting over. I think we live in a time right now where there are more opportunities than there were in the past in the ability to create and live a life that is fully in alignment with you, not society. And in return, it only will become normal in society for us to pursue our true dreams and passions. I want to leave it at, if you're in this transition or you're in this exploration of starting over, I'm fucking rooting for you. And whether I know you or not, I fucking got your back. Because we need more people who are living true lives to themselves, not for anybody else, but themselves. Because the kids need it. The kids need a new mentor example of what life is actually capable of. And it's not just working a 9 to 5. And it's not just chasing this career. I think there's so many dreams to be accomplished, and dreams that are not even comprehended in the sense that is so needed for humanity, that why the fuck not? Because life is way too short, and the unexpected happens. So let's stop playing small, and let's go full blown. That's the energy I'm leaning into, and that's the energy I'm emitting out there as well. 'Cause I also want to see other people doing it, because it only validates and encourages me to continue rebuilding and starting fresh and implementing the things in my life that I know is going to be fulfilling for me and something that's going to be really special for those around me and my son.
Mm-hmm.
So go for it. Throw the Hail Mary.
I like to say my dream is where everybody else's dream comes true. So on that note, if you're making lemonade, come see Leo. He's got the honey. Thank you, Leo, for sharing your story.
Thank you, brother.
And doing your work as a man in the world, your commitment to being safe, to being a space of non-judgment for those around you, whether you know them or not, ripples into your community and your community's community. So thank you.
Thank you, brother, for showing up.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And being a brother.
And thank you to our listeners for being here with us, for doing your work, for giving us your time and attention, and for sharing your love with the world. You are a gift that the world needs, and I know that because you are here. So keep doing what you need, ask for support when you need it, and stay in touch. Let us know what you want to hear about, who you'd like us to interview, whether it's you or someone you look up to. And we'll see you in the next one.
Aloha.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the interview today. And if you haven't already done so, please like or follow us on whatever platform you're listening to, and let us know if you have any questions or comments or requests of future interviewees.
And we hope you find this inspiration, the clarity, and the direction to fully lean into being human, whatever that means for you. Aloha.